one of the more common things that people struggle with is this sense inside themselves that there's just something in there. There's something about us that just isn't quite good enough or cool enough or smart enough or funny enough to really make people like us, right? I mean, this isn't true with everybody, but most of us struggle with some of that to some level, right? We look at other people and everybody seems to really like them. And we're like, maybe I have to be more like that, because there's something in here that if people really knew who I really was, then they would discover that, oh man, maybe they're not quite as cool. They're not quite as awesome as we thought. And then we'd experience some rejection, right? And this is particularly true when we grow up in homes where kind of some of our own sense of self wasn't developed very well, right? Either our parents weren't really engaged in our lives because they were super busy doing their own thing. And this is not to blame them or say that they suck as human beings, right? But it's just the reality in some families that the emotional development of the sense of self in kids just doesn't happen very well, right? And so we come into adulthood carrying some of that. And the challenge oftentimes is that being authentic and being vulnerable and opening ourselves up and just being our true selves feels very scary, because there's a feeling that if people really knew who I was, that they would reject me. They really wouldn't like me. So instead, we kind of put on this face, right? We put on this bit of a performance of showing how cool we are, or trying to be really funny, or taking, bits of other cool people that we see and try to implement that into our presentation, our social presentation, to try to make ourselves seem more lovable, more cool, and funnier or smarter than we feel inside, right? And what I want to share with you today is this idea that by doing that, we only further undermine our own sense of self, right? Because when we do that, we are reinforcing the idea that the only way that we are lovable, the only way that we are cool enough or smart enough or funny enough, is if we try to put on this performance for people. And it's really the performer that they're cheering for or they're interacting with, not the core of who we are. So it really tends to undermine our feeling that this in here is actually awesome, that this in here is totally cool. And just because we grew up in a family, right, or just because we had events in our lives that made us perceive ourselves as not being cool enough, not being funny enough, not being witty enough for people to love, the reality is that you are. And the more that you can just show up authentically and just bear your imperfect soul, right? Just be the brilliant, nutty, awkward, nerdy, sometimes not funny individual that you are. What you are going to find is that there are a lot of people who want to know that person. It may be different from the people who wanted to know your performance person, right? But there are many people in this world who want to know your authentic, flawed, imperfect self, because that feels like a real connection and they can relate. They're like, I know, I'm a fraud. I'm flawed. I'm imperfect. I also have insecurities and I tell stupid jokes and I'm always afraid that people will think I'm dumb, right? I mean, because that is just part of the human experience. We all have that, regardless of what, people on social media say. We all struggle with that stuff. And so if you can just be authentic, just open yourself up And the people who fell in love with the mask part of yourself, this kind of artificial, look at how cool I am, look at how great my life is person, right? Some of them may look at your authentic self and just go, oh, you're not the same person. I'm looking for this kind of artificial, saccharine sweet kind of individual. So they will go away, and that's fine. That's fine. Because what that'll do is that'll open up the door for the people who want to connect with you in a very authentic human way. And that, more than anything else, will really feed our soul and help us feel like, you know what, just because I kind of felt like I was this nerdy fraud, right? Or that I was broken or unlovable or whatever. The reality is that, there are a lot of other people who are just like me and would love to know the real me, would love to connect with the real me. You need to find your own audience, right? You need to find your own community, people who are attracted to the person who you are deep down, not the person that you try to portray. Right? So as much as you can, really focus on being authentic, being vulnerable, and allowing people to see, the insecure, imperfect, nerdy, flawed, dumb joke, unfunny kind of person that you really are. Because the reality, we're all kind of that way, right? I mean, most of us are that way. There are some, super cool kids with all the pretentiousness and all of that kind of stuff. But the reality is that most folks are pretty much the same. We all grew up in imperfect families. We are all imperfect human beings. We all struggle with a lot of the same stuff. We think about dumb things. We enjoy hobbies that, maybe aren't super cool. We would never go up on a highlight reel on TikTok or Instagram, right? But that's the reality of the world. That is the reality of human beings, right? And the more that we can just engage our humanness with all of its foibles and just show up authentically in that way, we are going to attract people in our lives who love that about us, right? And that's when we really experience a sense of belonging, of being accepted, of being safe, of being connected, of all of that stuff, right? So be your authentic self and do not be afraid of being an imperfect human being and just showing that, because there are a lot of other people who are just like you who would love to know that person.